ride.
Want a lift?
Hey! Okay, dude, let's see what that jalopy can do!
What's a jalopy?
First off the line.
Yeah, I'm sure they're feeling pretty silly right now.
Hey guys, Zack here, and welcome back to Megas Month. So, we have finally reached the end. We have finally gotten to the end of what was originally recorded for Megas XLR. So, this final episode, and this is what I've been putting off for the month because I wanted to kind of talk about this, but when I got to it. But this episode is the first part of the final episode. Because this is the part around the time where they realized they had been canceled. This is around the time where they realized they had been canceled. They weren't going to be able to come back for another season. So the studio and the creators decided to end the show off with a bang. They decided to go off with one of the hardest hitting episodes in the entire series. They decided to go into one of the most harrowing fights that Coop has ever faced, and it is supposed to be the series finale. It's supposed to be where the show ends. Even though they didn't initially envision it ending here. And unfortunately, this is where Cartoon Network. This was kind of before Cartoon Network started screwing them over, and they quickly realized that, hey, we need something to end the show off to make sure that it goes out with a bang, and everybody knows that, hey, we went out the way we wanted to go out. Not necessarily, but we decided to end the series on a note we felt it would be appropriate to end on. And this episode, and what ultimately wound up coming from this was the final episode of the series, Rearview, Mirror, Mirror, which is a two-part, hour-long finale to Coop's journey. It is the two-part, hour-long finale to a show that unfortunately got axed way too soon. And this episode actually sets up the setting for this episode. So it's and it does kind of set up who the final antagonist of the series is going to be going into it. So I mean, they don't actually show him until the very end, but I am going to get into it, and I am not going to spoil it. But it is a very big and very interesting thing. But in case, yeah. Well, actually, I guess I did kind of spoil it because it's the thumbnail for the episode. You guys probably know who it is at the ending. And odds are most of you who watch the show already know how it ends. But in case, yeah, this episode opens up with Coop trying to facing off against the Gorrath, who are currently trying to use a new device called the core remover, which is as it sounds. It's designed to tunnel to the Earth's core, remove the metal spear at the center, and then the Earth will gradually just cool itself down and then go into a heat death and die. So basically Gorrath's plan this time around is probably one of the most evil ones he's had. He's going to try and tunnel to the Earth's core, steal the metal ball with it, steal the molten metal within, and then the Earth will be unable to sustain itself from a magnetic core or any of the other things, and that would eventually shut down. And arguably, it's unclear obviously we don't see what the core remover actually does, because the episode just kind of, it's not really important to the plot. It's just there as an initial setup to be like, hey, Coop and the Gorrath are fighting, and that's supposed to set up the plot of the episode. And of course, I should mention, this actually would work. This is a thing that would work if the drill is heat proof, which I'm not entirely sure if it is. And again, they don't really elaborate what the core remover is, other than it's just a giant drill that's going to drill into the Earth and remove its core. But I would imagine if it were indeed heat proof, or at least heat resistant enough to make it that far, it would work. If you remove the core, it means that the Earth will no longer be able to heat itself, because obviously the rotation of the core is what enables the molten lava inside to actually kind of move around and continue heating. And without that, it will eventually just cool out by itself. And also without a magnetic core, would eventually cause the magnetosphere that keeps us safe from solar radiation and all the other things. Yeah, that would just go away. That would just be completely gone if that were to stop at any point, or otherwise be removed. So yeah, that would just cause that would eventually cause a whole myriad of problems. So if the fact that the Earth suddenly cools down and is no longer able to sustain life isn't enough to kill us, the fact that we are now vulnerable to solar winds definitely will. But and Coop quickly kind of realizes this. He is actually fighting off against Gorrath with what we find out as a new golden controller, which is kind of cool and also has a lot of buttons to emphasize how complex and interesting and new it is as part of Coop's arsenal. And Coop and Gorrath are currently facing off. Coop is initially facing off against Gorrath's Glorf soldiers in their respective mechs, and eventually, while Kiva and Jamie are actually trying to deactivate the core remover to make sure that it doesn't go off and destroy everything. And of course, Coop quickly realizes the stakes. He's trying to fight back against the Glorf, and eventually Gorrath decides to take on Coop himself, pointing out that all of his forces should be focused on defending the drill from Kiva and Jamie. And sure enough, he then proceeds to face off against Coop in his own personal mech. And the two start punching each other, getting in a fight and getting a little bit rough. And in an effort to actually kind of throw Gorrath off of him, Coop proceeds to put a series of combos into the new controller that he has. Although it's a new controller, so obviously he doesn't fully understand what some of the combos do. And in particular, the one he puts in to try and get Gorrath off of him winds up opening a wormhole. Or cross-dimensional rift, as we later find out, and it winds up sucking Coop and Gorrath inside, and of course Gorrath has no idea what Coop actually did, and tries to demand to know what he did that's causing this, and Coop obviously doesn't know because he has no idea what he did, but of course this results in Coop and Gorrath, they temporarily get separated, but this results in Coop and Gorrath being teleported to an alternate planet, and Gorrath winds up going loose and going off somewhere else. But Coop winds up on this alternate world, and he initially mistakes it for an alien planet. And he remarks that he's tired of actually landing on alternate alien planets, and starts looking around until he discovers that it's Jersey City. The place where he's landed is an alternate destroyed Jersey City. And of course, Coop is very confused and wonders why he's home, and also wonders what happened to Jersey City. And of course, after looking around, he eventually sees a statue for Sal's Lumber, which of course prompts Coop to make a Planet of the Apes reference, because that is just the common reference that you do with something like that. Literally, the whole thing is that if you guys don't know, that's how. I mean, spoilers, of course, for Planet of the Apes, but that's how it ends. I forget who the main character is, but eventually at the very end of Planet of the Apes, he sees a statue of the Statue of Liberty, realizes he's been on Earth all along, and then proceeds to bemoan the fact that they blew up the Statue of Liberty and everything on his own planet. And Coop makes a similar thing where he sees everything he loves having been destroyed. Eventually realizes he's on his home planet, and then also quite literally quotes Planet of the Apes in that final scene. And of course, I'm pretty sure everybody knows what that reference is referring to at this point, because it's been done to death. But yeah, this episode, but yeah, it is very much a reference to Planet of the Apes. And eventually, after Coop does that, he then wonders aloud if it is in fact his fault. And then shortly later, Gorrath winds up recovering, and he's very confused as to what's going on as well. But Coop winds up confronting him and attacks him, and asks him what he did to his planet. And of course, Gorrath denies having done any of this, pointing out that if his plan had succeeded, there wouldn't be much of a plan to build a city on, much less the city being around at all. And of course, this ultimately causes the two of them to get into a bit of a shoving match with their robots, where neither Coop or Gorrath really fully understand what's going on, and they're just kind of accusing each other of destroying the city, when in actuality neither of them did. They just kind of arrived there. But as they're actually getting in their shoving match, Coop is actually shot by somebody, and it's at this point where we actually see several Glorf mechs suddenly show up and surround them. And Gorrath, thinking that cavalry has arrived and has come to actually save him, then orders them to actually attack Coop and finish him off, so the Earth will be his. But of course, then it's at this point where the Glorf mechs actually turn their guns on Coop, or rather Gorrath, both. As we find out, the Gorrath mechs actually aren't on Gorrath's side, but when Coop actually gloats about it to Gorrath, they then turn their guns on him, and Coop realizes they're not on his side either, which causes him to become confused. At which point Gorrath demands to know who's in charge of the squadron and why his own mechs have turned against him. And then their monitors turn on to reveal that the people in charge of the mechs are humans. Which of course causes Gorrath to become very confused, pointing out why humans shouldn't actually be piloting his mechs, and he has no idea why they're there. But of course they quickly realize that. But of course the person on their intercom orders them to stand down and come along quietly or face destruction. And Gorrath outright admits that he's not going to let himself admit surrender, especially to his own war machines. So he then proceeds to pull out a knife and actually does a pretty good job after testing how sharp it is by scratching it alongside his own mech. Proceeds to actually do a pretty decent job of actually fighting off several of the rogue Glorf mechs. And Coop proceeds to join him. They proceed to actually start facing off, not necessarily together, but also kind of together. They're kind of fighting alongside each other without actually fighting alongside each other. And at one point, Coop does indeed wonder when if they're on the same side, because he goes to destroy one of the rogue Glorf mechs and winds up hitting Gorrath in the process, and then apologizes, but also wonders out loud if they're actually on the same side. And Gorrath admits that he won't join Coop if he can help it, and then proceeds to actually, despite the fact that they were completely outnumbered by mutual enemies, Gorrath decides to take the opportunity to actually fight Coop, which of course at one point actually shoots a grappling hook weapon into Megas, which Coop deflects with an electrical weapon and winds up short-circuiting Gorrath's systems, which takes him out of the fight. And when Coop quickly realizes he's completely outnumbered, he points out that he's got this, when in actuality he doesn't. We don't actually see that fight. Coop just kind of gets arrested and locked into a prison transport alongside Gorrath, who has since been stripped of his armor. And yeah, it's a very weird visual because you see Gorrath with it in his armor throughout the whole thing. So the fact that they took his armor just feels very weird. I mean, it makes sense that that there would be flesh and other things under there, but considering the fact that his armor has mostly covered his entire body, it is just very jarring to see him naked, basically. And of course, well, since they're stuck in the prison transport, and amidst accusing each other of not, because they don't really like each other, Gorrath and Coop then also proceed to kind of ask what happened in between throwing insults at each other, and Gorrath eventually theorizes that whatever Coop did, it stuck them in an alternate timeline where of course this Jersey City seems to have been destroyed, and Coop figures that much, but also points out that it wasn't entirely his fault, and he had no idea, and he really didn't have any idea what he was actually doing with his buttons, and of course Gorrath just kind of bemoans the fact that it is indeed Coop's fault, and points out that he doesn't like being stuck on that planet with him, much less with Coop, who as you can probably imagine isn't exactly Gorrath's favorite person, like at all. Obviously they've been at each other's throats for the entire series at this point, so obviously Gorrath doesn't like Coop very much, and Coop in turn doesn't like him. But of course, when Gorrath does point out that he doesn't like being stuck there, Coop then looks out the window and points out that Gorrath hasn't actually seen half of it. And sure enough, when they actually arrive at their destination, Gorrath discovers that it's the Carriager, now completely destroyed and turned into a human refugee camp, which of course causes Gorrath to become very confused, and he wonders what exactly has happened to his forces, that now the Carriager has been occupied by humans. Of course they are eventually taken out of the transports and are dropped in prison cells, which Gorrath and Coop both remark is ironic, considering the fact that it's Gorrath's ship. Of course, Gorrath is going to point out that it's a little bit ironic to be trapped a prisoner in his own ship, and of course, Coop even points out what exactly it is that's going on. At which point, they're actually approached by the leader of the refugee camp with the humans, and what we find out is that it's an alternate version of Jamie. which of course Coop is very happy to see, but he also wonders why Jamie has actually locked him up, and points out that if he lets him go, they can actually fight back against Gorrath. But of course, Jamie points out that he has no interest in letting him go, and also hints that that there's something a little bit screwy with alternate Coop. I should mention, because he implies that Coop has actually put on a few pounds, which Coop seems to be a little bit confused about, and he also points out that they thought Gorrath was dead, and wonders what Rocky actually crawled out of, and of course Gorrath points out that obviously he would rather face death than surrender, and points out that would be pitiful, that would actually be pitiful for one of his own kind to actually go and hide, but which Coop actually does add on, pointing out that of course the fact that he's been locked into his own bridge should be pathetic enough, but when Gorrath kind of just keeps silent about that, but in case alternate Jamie then proceeds to point out that even though he does point out that this is actually a problem, he does point out that of course he points out that now that he's finally has Coop as his prisoner, and he's never letting him go, pointing out that he's been trying to capture him for a long time, and of course Coop is very confused about this, especially since it doesn't track with the Jamie he knows. As Coop quickly points out, and we see a bit of a montage in his head, Coop and Jamie have definitely roughhoused a little bit and gotten under each other's skin from time to time, but Coop does point out that despite that, they're still very much friends, and wonders what happened that caused the relationship to sour. But of course alternate Jamie then proceeds to just kind of leave, pointing out that they should enjoy their stay there because they're never leaving. At which point he walks off, and of course Coop is a little bit confused as to why Jamie is being a bit of a jerk, and wonders why Jamie is suddenly evil, which of course Coop is very confused about that, and also points out that alternate Jamie seems to be more of a jerk than regular Jamie, even though, interestingly enough, alternate Jamie, I should mention, unlike regular Jamie, isn't a coward. He's very much a leader. He's very much in charge of everything, and that does wind up kind of playing into something a little bit later that I'm really trying hard not to spoil, but of course Gorrath points out that obviously something is going wrong, but does point out that if alternate Jamie was serious about finishing them off, he should have just killed them outright instead of just keeping them locked up. But at which point Coop wonders what Kiva would be doing if she were here, pointing out that she would probably bust them out of the prison cell and leap in. And of course it's at this point where Gorrath proceeds to do exactly that, because obviously he designed the cells, he knows how to get out of them. And Coop quickly points out that he has that was actually pretty cool, but it's at this point where Gorrath actually grabs Coop, pointing out that obviously he would be more than happy to finish him right there and now, but does point out a very obvious problem in that they're currently stuck in the dimension together and they can't really get out on their own. So with that in mind, he does point out that he needs Coop alive for now, because as he points out, they need to actually leave together in their own respective mechs, and it does point out that so long as they get back to respective mechs, they should be fine. Although Coop is very confused, he does indeed decide to go along with Gorrath's plan, and also is implied to have asked Gorrath for more details, at which point Gorrath does explain to him off screen what's going on. And Coop eventually points out that Gorrath then proceeds to explain to Coop that because they came together to this alternate dimension, they need to leave together. That's how it works. And of course, Coop doesn't fully understand the mechanics behind it, and pointing out, because obviously Coop's a little bit stupid, and even points out that he missed the class on this whole alternate timeline business. And of course, Gorrath is also visibly annoyed working with Coop as well, pointing out that obviously he would be more than happy. Again, he would be more than happy to destroy Coop, but of course he points out that since he needs Coop alive to get out, he'll point out that he'll just destroy him later once they get back to their own timeline. And of course this causes Coop to wonder why this alternate future seems so bleak, and points out that he wishes the alternate future that they had wound up in was actually a little bit cooler. And sure enough, he then starts fantasizing about all the different possible video game worlds that an possible alternate future would be based on. But eventually Gorrath does indeed snap him out of it, and points out that they're actually running into the main base now. And of course, they quickly spy their own respective mechs and quickly realize that everybody is just kind of heavily guarded. And they quickly and Gorrath quickly points out to Coop that they need to figure out a way to actually distract all the enemy soldiers to actually get past them and get to their mechs. And Coop starts looking around to think for something, and in the process accidentally sets off a beacon, which of course Coop quickly tries to shut off, and hopes to God nobody heard that, but of course everybody heard that, and they're eventually brought in front of alternate Jamie, who quickly points out that of course he should have known that Coop would pull something like that, pull some sort of tactical diversion to actually call in his reinforcements to actually come and destroy the base. And of course Coop points out that since that's apparently what he did, he points out that of course he's trying to do that, pointing out that he doesn't really like the idea of Jamie being evil, and he just wants to return home. But of course, Jamie points out that alternate Jamie just points out that he's not having really any of it, and then proceeds to pull out a gun, pointing out that he should have finished them off when he had the chance, and points out that he's not going to make the second mistake. But it's at this point where a series of white mechs, which I should mention are based on the Zaku mechs from Gundam. They're based on the Gundam robot. They're based on the standard enemy Gundam robots, but they're white. So yeah, they have a very similar appearance. And sure enough, Coop is very happy, pointing out that the cavalry seems to have arrived. And of course, alternate Jamie then points out that he'll have to deal with the prisoners later, and points out that obviously everybody needs to get to their max and deal with the current threat that's currently destroying their base. And of course Coop and Gorrath do eventually get back to their max, at which point Coop proceeds to deliver one of his signature trash talks about everything that went wrong in the episode. But as Gorrath quickly points out, and Coop even admits to this, through force of habit, Coop accidentally redirected his trash talk at Gorrath, even though they're on the same side. And when Gorrath points that out, Coop just chalks it up to a force of habit and didn't really mean to yell at Gorrath for something he didn't do. So yeah, the trash talk doesn't really matter in this episode. It's literally used as a gag because Coop just yells at Gorrath through a force of habit, and it's really funny. But in case Coop then proceeds to climb into Coop and Gorrath then proceed to climb into the mechs and proceed to fly off as the various Gorrath mechs are actually trying to fight back against the new white mechs that have shown up, and of course these robots seem to actually be pretty tough. They're actually putting quite a dent in alternate Jamie's forces, and Coop does point out that seems like the good guys are actually doing more damage than than alternate Jamie, and is very confused as to why that is. And of course this causes Coop to become very confused. But then alternate Jamie is actually trying to fight back against one of the enemy robots, and he winds up getting knocked into a pillar that almost crushes him. And Coop quickly realizing that he can't leave alternate Jamie behind, because alternate version of him or not, it's still his best friend. So he immediately flies in to save alternate Jamie and pulls him to safety. Which of course causes Gorrath to complain, pointing out that they should leave him. But of course Coop can't leave a person in need behind, and does indeed scoop up Jamie's Glorf mech that he's using, and proceeds to pull him out of the colony and to safety. At which point alternate Jamie then proceeds to point out to Coop that he isn't really particularly happy about the fact that he saved him, pointing out that the enemy robots have destroyed it and have destroyed his home base, and points out that if he was going to go down against Coop's army, that he might as well have just gone down with honor rather than let Coop save him. And this of course causes Coop to become very confused, because obviously he doesn't have an army. He quickly points that out, as does Gorrath, and of course this causes the two of them to become very confused, and realizes there's some sort of misunderstanding. At which point Coop points out that obviously he wasn't trying to destroy the base, and also points out that obviously he points out that Jamie kind of had it coming, pointing out that he shouldn't have been doing evil stuff, and that obviously it's a lot more fun to be good guys. At which point Jamie reveals that he is the good guy, which of course causes Coop and Gorrath to become even more confused than they were before. And it's at this point where Coop wonders who the bad guy is, at which point a mech resembling Kiva's from the very first episode shows up, and sure enough, we see alternate Kiva, and she's evil, which of course confuses Coop to no end. But of course Coop then is very confused as to why Kiva is actually a bad guy. But then she actually winds up telling whoever her commander is that she's waiting on his orders. At which point we actually see a large mech with a number 13 on it, and then we hear a very familiar voice telling them to mobilize forces and destroy them immediately. And then Coop finally is able to get a good look at the pilot, and what we find out is that it's actually alternate Coop, who is now evil. And then evil Coop then proceeds to deliver an evil laugh, and the first half of the episode ends. So, yeah. Basically, this episode is basically a trope of the whole, you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become a villain. And in this episode, we got both. So obviously, the show at this point, it was canceled. It was not coming back for a third season. But, so of course they decided to play on the whole, well, you either go down a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain trope, where obviously eventually a hero in his quest to do good eventually starts going down a dark path because he doesn't know when to stop fighting, and eventually goes on to become an evil version of himself. And this is very much that trope. Very much so. So evil Coop is basically just an alternate version of Coop that is implied to have never actually stopped fighting and for some reason turned evil. It's not explicitly stated, but the fact that that his robot has a number 13 on it, which implies that he swapped out and upgraded Megas, because obviously Coop's racing number is 12, whereas Evil Coop's is 13, which of course makes Evil Coop, and of course there's also the connotation that Evil Coop's mech is evil, because obviously 13 is the quote-unquote evil number. But yeah, this episode sets up that the final antagonist is in fact Coop's evil self, and that is very much an awesome reveal, and I do kind of love that. But this episode is now going to lead into one of the most harrowing fights in the series, where Coop now has to defeat his evil self, and of course this is going to be a lot fun. But and also I should mention this, it's not really relevant to the episode at all, but the post-credits scene, in addition to actually showing that this is actually a two-parter and that there will actually be another part of this episode, it also reveals that the Gorrath as well as Kiva and Jamie are just kind of standing around because they don't know where either of their guys are. They don't know where Gorrath or Coop are, so they just kind of stand around. And at one point, the Gorrath commander just kind of shrugs at Kiva and Jamie, who of course don't know where Coop is. But yeah, what a setup for the episode. Obviously, it's the thumbnail for the episode, so it kind of spoiled itself already. But yeah. Evil Coop is the final villain, and that is just a really pipe thing. Obviously, I love evil versions of characters. I love that a lot. That is one of my favorite things. And of course the final antagonist that we're going to be seeing. I remember this episode. I remember seeing the final episode and how epic and awesome and crazy it was. But yeah, this final episode gotta be fun. Gotta be a fun review where Coop is now going to be fighting his evil alternate self, and I am looking forward to it. But in any case, yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Facebook and on Twitter in the description below. Be sure to check out my Patreon in the description below as well. It's only a couple bucks a month. It does really help me out. And you guys get access to a bunch of cool perks that are my way of saying thanks. So be sure to check those out. Link is down in the description. And finally, if you want to see more content from me, then be sure to check out the videos linked in the end screen. The top video is the most recent one. It may or may not be this one. Whereas the bottom video is a video recommended to you based on what you've already seen from me. And in this particular instance, it's the previous one of these that I've done, Courage Month. So if you absolutely want to go check that out, again, link is down in the description. Go check that one out. But in any case, thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.